are going to impact the people around me, specifically like the people of color, because like of the colonial settler like dichotomy, where like we as white people have, or like I don't want to generalize, but I and like my family has come into a place that's not my own, and become the norm. Like I'm accepted because of like the way I look and the way I act, and like just understanding that the norm in America and like what mainstream culture values right now. And I think that like there's definitely ways in which it's changing and like conversations are being opened up, but for in general, like mainstream culture is whiteness, and recognizing that I need to create a space where I can amplify people's voices that, you know, have been marginalized for centuries. But, yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Maddie. I think that those are important things to keep in mind. Think about like when I was a student at Whitman, the mascot was still the missionaries. I'm not sure if that was true. Like the shift happened to the Blues after I left. But yeah, just thinking about, you know, even being at a place called Whitman, like how does that like decolonization play in when our college is named after a missionary? Slightly problematic. Anyone else? I really appreciate it. I know it's a tricky subject. So yeah. So I'm going to go through just a few kind of statistics about where the field is at the moment, just to kind of think about a few things. So this is a map where they've expanded the different countries based on how many the percentage of academic papers that are coming from these different countries. So you can kind of see where most science is being produced is where countries are taking up more space than you would normally think of. So the United States looks rather bloated because a lot of scientific papers are coming in comparison. There we go. A lot of scientific papers are coming out of America, and like you can see Europe is also a lot bigger than it normally would be. Japan is also fairly large, which is interesting. Australia seems to be about the right size, so percentage of population per scientific paper, maybe Australia is doing a good job representing itself, but other places we're seeing that most science papers are still coming out of North America. Okay. North America and Europe. So this is another kind of visualization of that. This is just physics PhDs, where they've plotted Hispanic students, African American students, and the Native American students. Maybe. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is gonna be tricky. But the green circles represent the percentage of the population that if representation was equivalent to the percentage of populations, you'd want those lines to be hitting those circles. They're well below. So we're not getting representation in physics for PhDs especially. And you can see maybe there's some change with time, but in the past from 2002 to 2012, these lines are pretty flat, which tells you we're not really solving this problem of representation in the US at least. And this is also, I talked to one group a little bit about representation issues, but when you look specifically at women, both African American women and Hispanic American women, we'll see, okay. We're getting, the representation is much, much worse. And this is in physics, not astronomy. Astronomy is actually worse than physics. But this is not a percentage, but an actual number of women, African American women and Hispanic American women who got physics bachelor's degrees in the past 20-ish years. And it's low. So per year, and this is bachelor's degrees, and I think I looked up PhDs, so this is even worse, but there's about, in the United States, there's 1,700 physics PhDs awarded every year. So much more than that in terms of bachelor's degrees. So the fact that we can show these numbers for bachelor's degrees in a scale where like the max is just above 100 is ridiculous. We're not getting we're not seeing representation the way we should. And there's maybe some positive movement for Hispanic American women, but African American women, its line is staying really flat, which is showing that we're not changing things. We're not making physics more open to underrepresented minorities. And just one more way of showing that, this is again number of Native American students earning physics PhD. So just a reminder, per year, so this is per 5 years, but per year there's about 1,700 physics PhDs awarded. So if in a typical year, maybe only one of those goes to a Native American student, maybe, which again is just, should be a red flag to anyone in this field that we need to change something. Sorry. Trying to watch to see if I'm frozen or not, because I know I'm coming in and out. I'm sorry. Okay, so we've got this problem, and we can now start to think about what decolonization might look like and how we might be able to go about solving that. And so this is a table I took from a paper I really like that was looking at the differences between indigenous and European ways of knowing. And so there's some things that are similar. There's both an idea of storytelling and the importance of language in both of these systems. But there's a lot of differences as well. And one of the ones I think is something that we can really start breaking down in STEM that I am trying to, is the one that I highlighted here, the myth of lone achievement. So in the way we think of science right now, often there's kind of, you know, the nerd working alone who discovers something. So the nerd working alone who discovers something. So like in the Big Bang Theory, you've got Sheldon, who's kind of like our stereotypical nerd. But they're doing science alone. And that's very much not how Indigenous communities think of knowledge, as they think of it as really a community. We're gonna try that. It's not gonna work. Sorry. But hopefully now at least it's not echoing. I'm sorry. I wish I had gotten that email like 2 seconds sooner. I could have ran home. But this just idea of thinking about changing the ways we represent knowledge and changing, especially like if we can really emphasize the idea of working in groups and having knowledge be something that is owned by everyone and not, you know, professors at universities. There's also some interesting conversations going on about how you relate knowledge to the world around you. So in like having science be more of a way that we can connect with the world instead of just a list of facts or something that makes money. So another thing they highlight here is the difference between process versus product, where Western knowledge is also very goal-driven. We want to solve a problem, whereas Indigenous ways of knowing are more about going through the process, like thinking about how things are done and just working with the world around us. So this is one way that we might start thinking about decolonizing STEM, sorry, we might start thinking about decolonizing STEM, is by bringing in more indigenous ways of knowing into, yeah. So I tried muting my video and using my phone sound, that's when I got the echo. So I don't know if I can keep messing around. It seems like I'm mostly connected. Yeah. But we're also about to another breakout room. So then hopefully you guys can discuss a little bit whether or not I'm there. So I wanted to also turn a little bit of this discussion towards Mauna Kea and what's been going on in the past few years there, since this has been kind of a hot topic issue in astronomy. And I understand I am biased in this, and I'm trying to do my best to understand both sides. But as an astronomer, I really want this new telescope. I really want this new telescope to be built. And it does seem like Mauna Kea is the best option. So it's hard to let go of that, despite the fact I recognize that this is sacred land and we need to think about what that means as we talk about building a new telescope. The other thing that makes me kind of question some of this is that I think there's been some work on Mauna Kea that has been incredible in kind of moving forward what decolonization might look like. So I wanted to share this little video clip.
6 other radio and submillimeter observatories around the world, creating a radio telescope the size of the Earth, something that had never been done before. In 2017, the team collected data from the supermassive black hole in M87 to take a picture of the black hole. But the data would take 2 years to process. As they waited, astronomers turned to computers to model what the black hole would look like, based on what we know about black holes in general and this black hole specifically. Hundreds of possible models were produced, taking into account the spin and the specific mass of this black hole. Astronomers had no idea how accurate their models would be. In April 2019, after 2 years of processing, the astronomers were ready to release their final image, the first ever direct observation of a black hole's event horizon, its surface. The black hole has been given the name Hawaii through the Yahuahe Inua program at Imiloa Astronomy Center. Hawaiian language expert Larry Kimura took inspiration from the Kumulipo, the primordial chant describing the creation of the Hawaiian universe. Ho is the profound dark source of unending creation, a concept emphasized and repeated in the Kumulipo. Vehi means honored with embellishments and is one of many descriptions of Ho. Professor Kimura hopes to continue to name black holes in accordance with the Kumulipo.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to share that, hopefully you got most of it at least. I tried to pause when I lost connection. Is that I think there's some really cool work being done at the Imiloa Center. I think there's some really cool work being done at the Imiloa Center to unite the teaching of astronomy with the teaching of the native language in Hawaii. And so some of that has to do with naming. They named this black hole. They've also named some asteroids. A few years ago when Umeamea came through, they worked with the Native Hawaiian Language Center there as well to name that asteroid that came from another solar system, Umeamea, which means traveler. Umeamea, which means traveler from a distant land in Native Hawaiian. So there's some of what's happening on Mauna Kea is the work that needs to be done to decolonize STEM, I think, personally. So I'm concerned that if we choose as astronomers and people just in general to not build if we choose to not build a telescope on Mauna Kea, then we're maybe separating astronomy and indigenous ways of knowing instead of trying to work together. Also, at the same time, some of the papers I sent out, that were on the, it's not sharing the right screen, I don't think. Interesting. Oh, there we go. Give the perspective of Native Hawaiians, and I think respecting their traditions and trying to understand their perspective is really important, and we should listen and we should be open to working together. But I just want it to make sure that we can work together and that we just don't give up and leave, which is a possibility, and it might be part of the right answer. So on that note, as I kind of fade in and out, I want to put you guys back in your breakout rooms to, so maybe I'll just give like, we've kind of just, since I talked about it so long, now to kind of go back, just like the basics of the Mauna Kea issue. Essentially, there is an observatory on Mauna Kea, which is sacred land to the Native Hawaiian people. Astronomers want to build a new telescope on there called the TMT, or the 30-meter telescope, that would study all kinds of different science and just expand what we know would be. It would be the biggest optical infrared telescope on Earth. So not the biggest telescope, but a huge new one, and it would kind of drastically change how we see the universe. But the folks, Native Hawaiians, do not want us to build another telescope on their holy mountain, which is really because, so they don't want to build, they see Mauna Kea as the land of their ancestors, and it's just a really important part of their cultural tradition, and they see it as sacred holy land, so they don't want another telescope on this mountain. So there's been a lot of discussion about how to go about building this telescope and work decommissioning other telescopes on the mountain. Decommissioning other telescopes and tearing them down before we build the 30-meter telescope, but there's still a large movement of Indigenous Hawaiians who think there should not be another telescope on this mountain. So I would like to know what y'all are thinking, what you think the solution is, and this is also to get the bonus participation points for today. There's a short assignment based on this. It's called Scholar Strike. It's just essentially asking this question, and you can just post a text response. And then I will also go ahead and reopen up the breakout room so we can have a little bit more of a discussion together once you've reflected by yourself. So take a moment to answer this question for yourself, and then discuss it with your groups, and then